you look at cumulative emissions, who are the major emitters? Especially when you look at per capita emissions, these are all developed countries. So we have to look at these figures in different ways. So that means that the biggest emitters are the least, I mean, I wouldn't say the least affected, but definitely if you look at the impacts being felt by the most vulnerable countries, including the island states, least developed countries, those who have less capacities basically to deal with climate change, they are the most affected. And you look at their contribution to the greenhouse gas emissions, it's less than sometimes, even 1%, 2%, less than that, in fact. If you look at per capita emissions, it's even lower. So, so then we have to understand this whole negotiations process within the context of climate justice. And so the argument, as I mentioned earlier, about the colonial emissions is another one that was not counted for a long time. So there are still a lot of questions which we haven't really figured out in the most clear way. And then you also look at IPCC models. In fact, this issue was brought up by the Indian delegation at the Bonn Climate Conference, which happened earlier this year, the preparatory sort of conference, which happens again, annually. The Indian delegation brought up the issue of the lack of equity within IPCC models. Right. So, the scientific veracity of these models, which do not consider equity, again, you are expecting all countries to respond or to act on climate change in the same way. And that uniformity cannot be implemented, especially when you have this kind of differentiated responsibility and capacity and vulnerability. It is very clear that as we move forward, we cannot forget the fact that the pre-2020 commitments were not met by the majority of developed countries. A few of them did, but we know how, like through offsets and various other mechanisms. That is not credible enough. So obviously credibility is still lacking in the process as far as the developed countries' responsibility and their ambition is concerned. Even today, their ambition is still lacking. In fact, the developing countries seem to be doing more than their fair share of climate action as compared to the developed countries, which are still, laggards. I would say a lot of them are still laggards. They're waking up to the reality, but it's too late, and they are still, they are still sort of going through this process in a very gradual manner that doesn't really represent the urgency of the problem itself.